All right, well, welcome everyone. Pretty intimate group here we have. It's great, and thank you all online for being here. Yeah, while I'm thinking about it, if you all need to switch to a chair or whatever during this talk, just feel free to do that, right? Yeah. My talk tonight, I've been working on this talk for about, 2 months, ever since Valerie asked me to give a talk. At first I said, no, I don't want to give a talk. And then a week later I said, okay, all right, I'll give a talk. So, but this morning, I was going through, late last night and this morning, I was going through the talk and I was kind of timing it and whatnot, and it just didn't rise to this level of urgency that I'm feeling about the situation on planet Earth. And I was pacing around this morning in my house. I woke up alone and I was pacing around early in the morning, and it was like the news of the world was just welling up through me, and I was just like a monologue of the news from the last year or so, and it was like very clear, and I wasn't othering everything, and I was trying to stay interbeing, the practice of inner being. So, but man, it was profound for me, and so anyway, what I decided was I'm not going to give my talk, the talk I prepared. I decided I was going to give this talk, Koan by Susan Murphy Roshi, called the Koan of the Earth. And Susan Murphy Roshi, she's the founding teacher of the Zen Open Circle in Sydney, Australia. And she's also an author and a filmmaker. And I had a chance to meet her about 20 years ago. She was here at Mountain Cloud, and she gave a talk. Well, we sat and she gave a talk. I think it was like a Thursday night. And then a group of us took her out to dinner at Harry's, and because she was going to be heading back to Australia. So anyway, she's really a profound, bright, and humorous teacher. So so here comes the Koan of the Earth by Susan Murphy Roshi. It starts out with a quote from Albert Einstein. You cannot solve a problem with the thinking that created it. Hey, Christian, could you turn on the light? It's all ready to go, just this row above us. Right. No, it's got over one more. There you go. Yeah. So you cannot solve a problem with the thinking that created it. And I threw in another quote from John Tarrant. Pessimism implies too much knowing. So here's it is. Earth is where we all live. Earth sustains us. Earth allows us to be here temporarily. Like a good guest, we respect our host and all the beauty and bounty we are lucky to experience. we do no harm, and then we leave. This comment was posted as part of a website discussion, and it's pretty hard to argue with it, actually. However, our industrialized world constructs itself, Our industrialized world constructs itself in reverse image to inarguable reality. We live walled off from the earth as far as possible, though we will pay a high price for views of water or mountains. Many of us would by now find it unnatural to lie down to sleep on the earth, gather and cook food where we are, and drink water from a creek, defecate in a hole dug in the ground. Our air-conditioned, plugged-in level of material comfort estranges us from the earth, and even from the sense of what is natural. And it insulates us from the high cost of this intensely self-centered way of living, leaving that to be borne out of sight by other people, other species, the earth as a whole. We live at a maximum distance from the fact that we are here only temporarily, that we will age and die. Not only do we not respect our host and acknowledge the bounty and beauty earth pours out for us, we comprehensively distract ourselves from that by any means available. If pushed to notice it, we reassure ourselves that the mounting tsunami of harm left in our wake is entirely unintentional, not under our control. Doing no harm to the earth remains low on the agenda of an intensely industrialized, energy-hungry world. 7 billion of us are now transfixed by an impossible promise of all securing the extreme material and technological advantages presently lavished upon members of the industrialized world. The dense forms of energy, harnessed first from coal and then so spectacularly from oil, have lifted the material lives of growing number of us to levels of physical ease undreamed of in earlier generations. And this has happened so rapidly, it has been hard to catch up with all the harsh implications, though they are certainly now catching up to us. If human beings ever were entitled to make such short-term expendable use of the earth, it follows that all are equally entitled to the carbon-fueled dream of unending bounty, once enjoyed only by the West. The paradigm of the continual economic growth insists that this is realizable and good, and in fact that all of human well-being depends upon indefinite expansion of the market. The problem is that the price of this indefinite expansion turns out to be the forfeiture of climatic conditions hospitable to our species. And of course, not only to our species. The great extinction spasm we are living through right now, which could well include us, is tearing down the intricately interlaced ecologies of the earth as mere collateral damage in the pursuit of a single-minded, self-entitled idea. Too bad that it is extinguishing all entitlement to life forever for hundreds of Earth's life forms every single day, while we continue to add more than 220 new human lives to the planet every second, or more than 200,000 every day. From a position of accustomed comfort, it is hard to conceive of living in a way that would require greater personal skill, effort, and care to manifest the necessities of life, breaking our reliance on oil that has shown signs of peaking and beginning in an inexorable decline at exactly the time it has become woven into every detail of our lifestyle is seemingly impossible to contemplate. Yet any child can see through the magical thinking and selfishness that underpin the economic imperatives of limitless material growth and mindless waste that nevertheless will duly go on to shape their adult lives. The dream of an infinitely expandable planet placed entirely at our disposal was always just that, a dream, and it's fast becoming a nightmare. Tumultuous change on a vast scale grows increasingly likely with every day of business as usual. The only question is what form it will take, which order of climate shocks and political crises will start to shake our world apart, and how people will react as the market collapses and the source of plenty evaporates. The magic flow of plenty. An old Scottish fairy tale told of a fortunate village to which the fairies had given a magic cask in return for some good turn. Anytime there was something to celebrate, the villagers just turned the tiny spigot and the wine and communal goodwill would flow, inexhaustible. Everything went along beautifully until the day a curious housemaid decided to see just exactly how it all worked. She unscrewed the tiny spigot and took a peek inside. Nothing there but dust and ancient spiderwebs. And from that time on, the fairy wine cask yielded not a single drop of magic wine. There are many ways to read this story in the light of our time. One is that we must never look too closely at what produces the magic flow of plenty we dream will continue forever. Look inside at its dark workings, and the happy dream of forever will be shattered. Scarcity, dust, and ruin are waiting to be discovered inside it. Another is that the earth sustains our life with its magical weave of infinite relationships, of mutual dependency between all life forms and the elements that sustain them: water, air, soil, minerals, sunlight. Some call this peerless magic ecology, or nature. Others may see it as the grace that animates creation. Failing to trust and protect this perpetually self-renewing gift, attempting instead to exploit it as a bounty earmarked for our exclusive use, we tear the web of life apart. Let's take a kind of quick housemaid's peek inside the industrialized version of the fairy barrel and trace the biography of a typical North American tomato, as Peter Bohuth has described it. A genetically patented hybrid tomato derived from a Mexican strain is grown on land originally farmed by Mexican farmers in agricultural cooperatives. The new strain has low tolerance for local conditions, so the land is fumigated with an intensely ozone-depleting chemical, methyl bromide, then doused in pesticides. The toxic waste from production of these chemicals is shipped to one of the world's largest chemical dumps in Alabama, which is situated in a poor black neighborhood with marked effects on local health. The Mexican farm workers, displaced from their cooperatives but permitted to apply the pesticide to the plants now grown on what was once their farmland, are given no protection or instruction in proper application or of such dangerous substances. They are paid around $2.50 a day and offered no form of health care. The tomatoes are placed on plastic foam trays and covered in plastic wrap, then packed in cardboard boxes. The plastic wrap is manufactured in Texas, where local residents suffer exposure to dioxins that are byproducts of the chlorine manufacture and highly hazardous to their health. The cardboard boxes, which were once 300-year-old trees harvested from old-growth forest in British Columbia, are manufactured thousands of miles distant in the Great Lakes district, then shipped by truck all the way back to Latin American farms, using oil extracted and processed in Mexico. The boxed tomatoes are artificially ripened with ether. Now watery, weary, and nutritionally compromised, the tomatoes are sent by refrigerated trucks on vast freeway networks all over North America. Ozone-depleting CFC cooling equipment is used at every stage of their delivery to the tables of consumers, once called people, who are bound to wonder what on earth has happened to that delectable fruit that once went by the name tomato. While there is no evil master plan of ecological destruction in this story, and little conscious intent to destroy communities and lifeways, disfigure the countryside, and ruin the climate, nevertheless, it is one small part of an overarching system that effectively does evil by way of countless repetitive, cumulative failures of care and conscience, easily brushed aside in the process of maximizing profit. Nature always was, and still is, the real magic barrel. Its gift economy of every evolving life provided the original soil, water, seed, and flowering plants, and eventually the small green fruit that could be coaxed by human ingenuity and toil into large, juicy tomatoes. The industrial super magic barrel took over from there, turning this cyclical flow of gifts into one-way flow of profit into a few hands. The product was wrought from nature at extraordinary cost to natural systems, while its engineers refused point blank to register on its balance sheets the vast destruction of natural capital that it involves. That's a magic that fast wears out its welcome. Incidentally, there's no report in the story of the Fairy Barrel village ever sharing its great luck with any neighboring villages. The village apparently felt secure in its superior fortune and sense of entitlement, no doubt helped cover over its naked, mean-spiritedness. But a fairy gift can be a double-edged. Misuse exceptional good fortune, and you become cold and alienated, poverty-stricken in ways you may not even notice, until the next time you try to turn the tiny magic spigot and find the supply of all that really matters most has run out forever. Mind in worlds. These days, I can find myself in many worlds, or at least entertaining many propositions about what this world is, and what its fate may be. In even a single day, a whole flicker of darting thought and retreat from my thought, like schools of fish, surging this way and that. News of gigantic Antarctic ice shelves breaking away. The Gulf of Mexico fast becoming a vast ocean dead spot. The Great Barrier Reef expected not to survive beyond 2 more decades. Phytoplankton, the foundation of the entire marine food chain, reduced by 40% since 1950 due to warming seawater. island nations pleading eloquently and uselessly in Copenhagen and Cancun, global poverty set to skyrocket with climate collapse, the gap between rich and poor growing to obscene extreme. My thoughts dart this way and that, surging like schools of fish, and my emotions follow. In the never-ending avalanche of factoids, opinions, gossip, trivia, brands, and sound bites, there is no space or sufficient quiet for sorrow, reflection, and resolve. Is it like this for you? How are you dealing with it? When I walk out into the world, well away from phones, iGadgets, internet, radio, television, or newsprint, and walk on the earth and breathe the open air, I begin to recollect myself, and come back to earth. I gradually become a humble, humorous, earthy human being again, who belongs here as thoroughly as every natural thing I can find around me. This may be easier in the green and flowing world that lies beyond the nearly perfect human trance we call the city, but even in the city, the earth is always in reach. And when the earth is in reach, wonder is in spitting distance. The weed life taking root in the cracks of the pavement, a glimpse of a pelican moving above the buildings, a cat's cool stare from a warm brick wall, a puddle riffled by breeze disturbing its upside-down reflections, a tree root powering its slow way out of the asphalt and into a gutter. Just as they draw my attention calls them back to vivid life. Consciousness is partner to the composing of the world. Every sentient being creates an entire world according to its earth-given style of sentience and its experience of life. The world of the blowfly, blundering into a room, will be utterly unlike the world of the person trying to ignore its frantic buzzing, though both breathe the same air and drink the same water. The poet Anne Carson said, "There's no person without a world." Equally, there is no world, in the fully human, conscious sense of the word, without a person. Every human death takes with it an entire and unrepeatable world, a whole realm of memories, dreams, reflections, beliefs, and observations. We suffer this fact in the loss of each other and in fear of our own imagined loss of ourselves. If we do finally swat the blundering blowfly with a tea towel, what can we really know of the world extinguished in a single swipe? Although there are countless trillions of worlds alive on Earth, in 1968, astronauts Lovell, Anders, and Borman of Apollo 8 space mission became the first beings to leave Earth's orbit and see our one entire blue-green planet swimming in the black space. The depth of surprise and awe in those three men suggests they witnessed not merely an amazing physical fact, but a surpassing and singular miracle. They found themselves deeply stirred by this planet's luminous presence. Earth brought them to tears. Until we can expand our scope beyond self-centered and purely human concerns, to hold in mind the trillion worlds alive on this one earth at any moment, and to glimpse ourselves exactly in that vibrant, seamless web of interconnectedness, we are living in a kind of madness, which is to say, not living in reality. The great question of our time is whether or not we will prove able to wake into full awareness of the earth and the geophysical changes now in play, in time to avert the full-blown catastrophe. Even beyond skillful crisis management and regaining the intelligence needed for survival, such a challenge actually offers the exhilarating chance to reawaken our real nature, which has never departed 1 inch from reality. For what is realization or enlightenment but the earth speaking to us directly, with our own noise no longer overwhelming the signal? The unending call and response between human mind and planet Earth can be dimmed, but it cannot be turned off. It can be hard to hear over the avalanche of distractions, but the moment our resistance softens or just mysteriously gives way, it cannot be silenced. At that moment, we have arrived at the place where truly minding the earth begins. Our increasing impertinence, to use a word which originally meant not just rudeness, but lack of relevance, is that we have somewhere in the march of civilization lost the humble amazement of feeling the earth and ourselves to be a prodigious, unearned gift from the universe. How did we make ourselves self-appointed lords of the earth, and like spoiled children throw all gratitude and humility out the window? A deeper chord of human-earth relatedness composes the very cells of our body and lies entirely undisturbed by our childish strutting. But while we cannot kill the fundamental relatedness, we have broken our accord with the earth, and that may have us ejected yet again from Eden, this time setting fire to the ark on the way. The world, from our earliest emergence as a species, has always signified a human project entwined completely with nature. But the advent of human agency in shaping the earth has now reached a point where the fate of much of the biosphere of the planet is in the slippery, forgetful hands of human beings. And we have forgotten that our fate, too, is completely entwined with the fate of the earth. Facing the music. When the full scope of the damage we live by is fully taken in, it is undeniably crushing. I think we've all felt a terrible sense of being frozen in the headlights of an unstoppable juggernaut. That juggernaut is the globalized coal and oil-based military-industrial media economy, along with its vast web of national corporate power relations, digital information, opinions, and gossip. It is greased equally by foreign wars and the seamless collusion of all who enjoy the comfortable living conditions and infinite distractions of the industrially developed countries of the world. All of us on board the juggernaut have chosen to live obliviously towards this immense destruction of Earth's natural capital. We have deregulated ferociously unrestrained corporate entities, licensing them to exploit the Earth's resources without mercy, just as if they were limitless. It's an unlovely and fearful sight. And yet, have a look. The juggernaut is not separate from us. We are staring with growing fear and disgust at something that is not safely outside ourselves, but exists with our own full-blown participation. Cursing the drug dealer does not free us from being junkies. With the exception of those living entirely off the grid in every respect, by necessity or choice, there is not a man, woman, or child in the industrialized world who does not lend themselves daily, in some measure, to the all-encompassing appetite that is exhausting the Earth's resources. Wherever the juggernaut arrives, it devours rivers, mountains, forests, oceans, peoples, creatures, and every sign of the loveliness, benevolence, and balance of the natural world, leaving nothing indigenous, wise, beautiful, various, or whole in the debris of its wake. Just a flat, homogenized streak of so-called civilization, strip malls, car parks, industrial parks, concrete, smog, and endless high-rise. Or in poor country, not even that, just black plastic bags in the wind. Intensified poverty and rampant exploitation of people and natural resources. The juggernaut we all help create by failing to resist its stream of things and stuff, by turning a blind eye to its evils, by fearing it when it shows itself to be beyond moderating, is not driven by malevolence. It is powered by the usual array of human vices, but magnified exponentially by the speed and reach offered by oil and digitalized communication. The juggernaut pushes a barbarous worldview that has, in the last 3 decades, gradually left all public forms of caretaking and altruism towards each other and all life on earth almost entirely to voluntarism and religion. It is a worldview that still understands we and us in national and sporting terms, but barely at all in societal terms. I think we are all aware by now that the emperor of limitless consumption and economic growth has no shred of morality to cover the nakedness of its greed. But I think we also know that with the naming and exposure of the emperor, there goes the lifestyle. Is this why the moment global warming began to make a strong moral, physical, and practical claim on our attention, a blizzard of blinding denial was immediately unleashed? Public relations skills honed on seeding doubt about the effects of big tobacco on public health have been applied to the campaign aimed at seeding climate change denial under the rubric of skepticism, a handsomely funded snow job, traceable back to big oil. At the same time, all moves to decarbonize the economy have been branded a plot to destroy jobs and ruin the nation, despite the fact that a more comprehensive destroyer of jobs and nations than climate and environmental collapse is impossible to imagine. We must find a livable transition away from an economic system that is at war with the earth, but weighing up the harms between different courses of action and inaction will be extremely challenging. Yet, if we manage to accept the challenge, the intense rigor of responding to this great question of our time can wake up forgotten parts of ourselves and usher in our maturity as a species. The shared peril of global warming is not just an economic and political matter, but an overwhelming moral opportunity, as Al Gore has called it, to restore effective ethical breaks to a worldview religiously devoted to rapacious self-interest. My tone of hope is tempered by awareness of the grossly unequal material conditions of humanity, a gap in justice and sanity that has grown astronomically in the last 50 years and promises to yawn ever more widely as climate change impacts water and food security in the developing world, as we fondly call it from our padded sofas. I reflect on our shared emergency from a relatively easy first world life. Without that luxury, my chance to do so would be severely curtailed. I am also aware of how easily our comfort can insulate us for just a little bit longer from the sharp end of the emergency of climate change and global poverty already being endured by a majority of the people on earth. any illusion that we can safely enjoy, any illusion that we can safely enjoy the present flow of costly abundance is its own catastrophe ahead of the train wreck. To the extent that we find it possible to delay responding and defer paying attention, we are suffering diminished ability to think and move in a timely reaction to danger. Our equivocation, and easy distractibility is a form of succumbing in advance to the disaster. It enables our present limp state of political leadership, perhaps the shameful discrediting of those who publish hard scientific findings, and retards the push towards a shared, cogent vision of the magnitude of the change that must come. How did we let ourselves fall so deeply asleep at the wheel? The neoliberal economic rationalism to which the global economy has been wedded for the past 3 decades has almost completely disengaged a political we who can respond to serious threat. Margaret Thatcher's infamous "there is no society, there are only individuals," has burgeoned into an extreme egotism of a materially driven individualism and left us no longer very able to build solidarity around a coherent political position. For decades, we have seemed unable to believe in or even perceive a threat that so directly addresses something called us all. Any threat that was not all about me appeared to be undetectable. Planetary crisis has so far been addressed purely in terms of the thinking that created the problem. Take the longest and richest coral reef system on the planet that stretches for more than 1,000 miles off the coast of Queensland. In 2007, signs of coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef became impossible to ignore. It seems hard to believe now, but the Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, suggested that this could be solved by simply erecting shade structures over the most tourist-accessible sections of the reef. Such problem solving glides serenely past the stark fact that, besides being one of the most prolific sites of biodiversity on the planet, the reef is a whole, a most intricately and delicately balanced ecology of fish, crustacean, shell, and coral species, not a series of spots. And that likewise the warming of seawater that is killing the reef is part of a whole ocean system of currents. Most of all, it entirely disavows the fact that the reef is being killed by a global economic system that can never afford to admit the fundamental flaw of its logic of limitless expansion on a finite planet. As for the possibility of seeing that the highly heat-stressed state of the largest coral reef on Earth beginning to suffer a degradation of its complexity that threatens its entire collapse presents something much deeper than a problem to be solved. That it poses a profoundly important moral and metaphysical question to every human being alive today. This does not even begin to dawn at the horizon of such severely compromised thinking. An inescapable opportunity. We are living in what must surely be the most daunting and arresting moment we have ever faced as a species. We face a developing reality that can either condemn human beings to oblivion or inspire us to wake up to our lives in a dramatically more interesting way, a way that begins in living soberly and creatively towards the crisis of our planet, not as a problem to be solved by engineering an even better, safer human bubble, but as a constantly unfolding obligation to begin considering the remaking of ourselves as ecologically awake human beings. It's possible to live straight on to our reality instead of hiding out from it in 10,000 different ways. To do so, first we have to see through the way our sense of the world has been framed by the stories that form the bedrock of our civilization. Stories that pose nature as a dubious force to be mastered and utilized, or put more bluntly, raped and pillaged for profit. To the extent that these stories no longer explain the many things that urgently need explaining, they have become untrue. We can no longer adhere to truths that we have depended on to steer civilization in a trustworthy direction. At the same time, we have to recognize the need for a common story that can help us understand and engage with the new reality breaking upon our heads. In the stories we tell, as one Kwakiutl elder said, we tell ourselves. What would we find ourselves to be? And how would we behave if we were to live with all of our human ingenuity brought to bear upon living within the terms of the earth instead of despite them? If we were to recognize the rights of earth and other species in law, to mold agricultural and economic choices and the design of our technologies accordingly, discovering in the process a vast opportunity of learning and shared prosperity. This can be a huge, difficult adventure that will bring out the magnificence of human beings. It is also an act of love and compassion worthy of the earth, an unparalleled rousing of human minds in lifted awareness of our shared reality and shared planet. Transition away from the dream that we can live forever by massive damage to the earth is inevitable. We can do all we can to ensure that this transition is politic, able to take the great majority of us with it to a saner understanding of what a good life might be. In the little time available, we'll still have to pay every part of the price wrought by the changed climatic circumstances already incurred, but we can at least work to ameliorate them and avoid the truly unpayable price of continuing to pretend that this collective fantasy can endure. Powerful rebellion of the heart. The transition begins in a rebellion of the heart and the waking up of awareness that is inherent in us all. Perhaps it begins in noticing a growing repulsion towards the very excess itself. Do we really need more eye gadgets, apps, accessories, fashion items, short-lived toys, supersized servings, outsized cars, huge houses, and double garages bulging with all the things we have grown tired of? A rebellious refusal rises in the heart towards such a shallow, narrow, and essentially dull idea of what a human being is. Or it may start in a fury at the growing gulf between rich and poor, the behavior of the banks in privatizing every cent of their massive profit while nationalizing their trillion-dollar losses through public bailouts by the same taxpayers whose life savings and homes they've gambled and profiteered away. Or in the despair of being young, educated, saddled with a huge education debt, but with no prospect of work, or in the grief of seeing old-growth forests clear-felled for disposable chopsticks and paper packaging, or burned to make way for palm oil plantations, disposing the last orangutans of their remnant ecological niche. One playful Zen koan, shaped to kickstart our startling left-of-field heartfelt intelligence, goes like this. Once a woman raised a goose inside a bottle. When the goose was grown, she wanted to get it out. How do you free the goose without breaking the bottle? How do we break free of a human mindset that has trapped us, become toxic, and begun eating the earth alive? Now that question is still too full of the thinking that created the problem. There's a self-imposed barrier in proposing a problem of breaking free, since original freedom might well be discoverable as the very nature of the one who asks. To get down to that, you have to first let go of all you think you know about glass, bottles, and goose. So where do you find yourself? Asked Yunmen. So casually you might think he was not urging you to break out of prison. How will we avoid shattering human life into post-apocalyptic shards of its former self? An immensely practical and important question, yet this koan is also asking us to rediscover our original undividedness and the freedom it bestows, right there in the suffocating fear itself. It invites you to glimpse what the kitchen table moment revealed, that the crisis and salvation are inside each other. Or as Yunmen put it, medicine and sickness heal each other. Change like this doesn't come from top-down approach. No living system has a boss. The boss is all of us, inextricably together using the distributive wisdom of countless local actions occurring simultaneously. At a practical level, ways of freeing the goose without breaking the bottle can be seen in some of the communal intelligence of nonviolent resistance emergent recently in the Occupy Indignado movements. I have caught glimpses of the freed goose right there in the inventive energy of those recent uprisings. To be able to realize our real freedom within a sober, creative, playful awareness of reality is vital to get beyond the thinking that created the problem. Even if 1 in 100 people began to wake up to this degree, change ripples through, person to person, exactly like the Occupy Wall Street's People's Microphone, created to pass words of a public address from person to person when the right to using a public address system was denied. As William James said, countless small acts wear down the mighty when they simply persist in going under, over, or around every barrier placed in their path, or acting from seeing right through them in the spirit of the Zen Koan. The ancient Taoist text, the Tao Te Ching, which foreshadows and influences much of the character of Chinese Zen, says the same thing in the form of a fine koan for our time. The softest thing on earth overtakes the hardest thing on earth. It's almost as though we need to relearn the fundamentals that once were natural to us, like someone recovering from brain trauma. What it means to be a human being, a member of society, part of a family, in a community, and of the great community of life, in literally remembering what planet we're on. Can we quiet our nerves and minds for a time, look deep inside our own humanity and our own natures to rediscover the medicine to heal our collective madness? For we're not dead yet, and the world is still alive to sensitive human touch, so long as we extend it. And when the stakes are life on earth, all else is a diversion. So I thank you all.